So I've discussed Assassin's Creed Ragnarok a lot on the channel, probably too much admittedly, like Jesus Christ, but I've never spoke specifically about how well the setting works in relation to Assassin's Creed. So today I'll give my thoughts on how well the Viking setting works for Assassin's Creed. So before getting into the setting itself, I'll give a criteria of just a few things I think every Assassin's Creed setting should have, as well as sort of like a checklist for Ragnarok based off those things. So for one, I think every Assassin's Creed game should take place after the Hidden Ones were formed at the very least, so somewhere after 48 BC. The setting should ideally be one that lends itself to a fight against tyranny and corruption, so the assassins have more of a motive. And finally, it has to work on a gameplay level. It has to have some parkour functionality, people to fight, places to explore, and all that stuff you know from the previous Assassin's Creed games. So in terms of the first requirement being the time period, we're well safe. The Viking era lasted from the mid 8th century till like the mid to late 11th century, hundreds of years after the Hidden Ones were formed. In fact, it ended over 1,000 years after they were formed, so that one's well safe. We really just don't know much about the assassins of the first millennia of the AD, so this game could go one of two ways. It could be set in the earlier days of the Vikings when assassins were presumably still Hidden Ones from what we know, or it could be set in the later end in the 11th century and could possibly even give us some setup about the origins of the Levantine Brotherhood. Now, if you didn't know the Levantine Brotherhood or the Assassin, what we saw in Assassin's Creed 1, where they're an incredibly dedicated and organised order who were pretty well established. The reason I say this is because of their founding in the year 1050. Don't expect or want the characters of Ragnarok to be directly the ones who started, because that's already established in canon, and also Levant is far from any Viking activity. However, what we could see is something of a precursor to that. Almost the entirety of the era was set before this, and there's a lot of room in AC lore for something like this to be set up. It could be like a Darius situation where some of the Viking assassins share a similar ideology to the Levantine ones that spreads and is a part of the Order's eventual formation. I'd really love that because it'd be a way of connecting new Assassin's Creed to where things all started without being too forced, because they wouldn't, directly first-hand have formed the Levantine Brotherhood. That's just the thing I like. Anyway, that's getting off track. In short, yes, the time period does work, and it works well too, as there's just a big gap in this time for Assassin's Creed canon, and a lot of interesting stuff could be done with that. So Ragnarok definitely meets requirement 1. Now, secondly, we have to ask, does the setting suit Assassin's Creed thematically, and is there injustice to be fought? And I'm going to say yes for this one. During this period, people all across Europe were terrorised by Vikings, not just in Scandinavia, but anywhere off of the North and Black Seas. People in positions of power, or poor farmers and sailors just trying to get by. It'd be a really interesting dynamic to see, because usually we, as the assassins, would fight people in a position of more official power. People like doges, popes, government officials, powerful business owners, of course, not forgetting the man himself, King George Washington. Basically, over the years, we have fought some powerful enemies who have wronged the people by giving orders and killing by proxy, with a few exceptions to that, a fair few, but still in the minority. Whereas in the Viking era, the people with the most power weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. I still have no idea if we'll be a Viking assassin or not, but I really like the idea of the assassins realising their stance on total freedom can often lead to chaos. The biggest example of this at the time being the Vikings, who used this freedom for wrong. The Vikings could always be a sort of in-between faction that isn't either Templar or Assassin. The idea of bloodthirsty warriors with no regard for innocence doesn't really fit either order, to be fair, so we'll have to see on that one. But finally, we've gotten to the gameplay. This is by far the thing on here that I'm least sure about, because there's so many components to gameplay, whereas with the others, it's quite clear-cut. So what I've decided to do is put together these sort of monuments, 4 things I think are really important to Assassin's Creed gameplay, and compare it to the setting and how well they work. These 4 things being parkour, combat, stealth, and exploration. So first of all, to just get right into these, parkour. This is a tricky one for a few reasons, because we don't know just how expansive this world is going to be for one. I think it's a safe bet we'll get some parts of Scandinavia, but the January leak stated we get Ukraine, France and Britain too, but I'll just stay with Scandinavia as that's the safest of these for sure. I've seen a lot of people say parkour isn't possible in Scandinavia, when in reality it is. There's plenty of cliffsides, mountains and castles for us to climb, although this would be a setting with far more countrysides, beaches and that kind of stuff, just by nature. Although I think there definitely is still plenty of opportunities for parkour and various parkour related set pieces, so I wouldn't write that one off anytime soon. The next thing in terms of gameplay is the combat, and yeah, this is by far the easiest of these requirements. This was a culture built on violence, and it was both a way of life and a pastime that was just rampant. In its execution, I'd expect it to be a far bit heavier than Odyssey, like super light sort of combat, just by nature of how the Vikings were built and the weapons they used. But they also did have their share of smaller weapons like battle axes and sea axes too, so I'd expect a little more variety. This was a combat culture, if anything, so we won't be short of a decent fight in this game, for sure. Now, next we have stealth, which is a thing I've seen a lot of people complain about already, but it's another one of those things we need to know more about. If we are a Viking, then yeah, it's probably going to have a minimal role, or even less than what we've got in the last few games, but if we aren't a Viking, which a lot of people are forgetting is a definite possibility, then this is definitely still in the cards. It's an Assassin's Creed game, and it's Ubisoft Montreal 3. Even if it wouldn't be as prominent as it used to be, it'd definitely still be there, because at the end of the day, it's Ashraf Ismail, and these guys, they just know what they're doing. It'll be fine. And that finally takes us to the exploration. We don't know if we'll get multiple locations or if we'll get naval, but Scandinavia alone just really excites me. It's a setting I hadn't even thought about in regards to AC, but it's just a beautiful place that seems to be picturesque from top to bottom, with some interesting architecture there too. I'm not talking about now, I am talking about back then. I've seen some like illustrations of what things would have looked like back then, and it does look just beautiful. Anything like naval and all the other countries and all that is just a bonus at this point with the knowledge that we know now. So now I've looked at everything with a bit of detail, I think that this is a good setting for Assassin's Creed. Of course, there's more that we need to know as to whether they're gonna like get the most out of that or whether they'll just get a bit out of it. But like, it does look good. Of course, there's more we need to know, like our role in the game as a protagonist and just how big the map is and what's in it. But right now, I like it a fair bit. You've got some potentially great locations, a gap to fill in AC lore, and just a threat for the assassins that writes themselves. Not so much a threat just for the assassins, but also the Templars too. I like the idea of like a middle faction. Anyway though, knowing what we know now, I'd probably give this setting like a 7 out of 10. There's a lot of potential for this setting, and I can't wait to find out more about how Ubisoft Montreal 3 are going to utilise it. Anyway though guys, that's been it for today. As always, this is just my opinion. So if you think this is a better setting than I do, or a worse one than I do, I'd just like to know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments, I'll be sure to read it. Anyway, that's been it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.